Okay, so hello everybody, I'm Beth Whittle and welcome to Restorative Circles. Your presenter is Cheryl McGee, so you are very lucky to have her today. Just a few friendly reminders, and forgive me for looking this way, I'm reading them off another screen. So please make sure that your microphone's turned off so as to not disrupt the session. You're more than welcome to leave your cameras on. I know I don't like presenting to little squares with names on them. And then if you have any questions, please put them in the Zoom chat and not the Whova app. That way I can make sure to get to all of the questions. And then again, please complete the session feedback form on the Whova app or the website in your agenda, and you will receive a conference survey on March 11th. So thank you so much for attending and enjoy. Cheryl, take it away.
All right. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. I am Cheryl McGee, as Beth said. I have the privilege of working with the Oklahoma State Department of Education and the Office of Student Support. I am a school counselor. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed alcohol drug counselor. So circles are near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to be able to share a little bit of the knowledge that I have about circles in hopes that this enhances your practice and your ability to go down this journey as many of us have with circles. So for those of you who may have really extensive knowledge of circles, this is an overview of circles. So this isn't a deep dive into all the components, but there are amazing programs out there across our nation that provide additional circle trainings. And so I encourage you to reach out and bolster your skill set that way. So in addition to, this is an overview again, and I hope to have time at the end to entertain some questions and really get this conversation going about circles. So I am typically a presenter that loves to walk around a room. So for the last year, presenting in this format, as many of you probably also experience, is often difficult. So I have made some notes to keep myself on task. So if I look away from the screen, please know I'm still attentive. I just want to make sure I hit components that I'm most likely to forget when I get in a role. So thank you guys again for joining me today, and let's get started. Well, I have to get, there we go. All right, so the goals that we're going to work on today is a general overview of circles, and then we're going to look at how to implement circles in a classroom setting or in a site setting for counselors. And then some examples will be discussed throughout the presentation, and then at the end, we will hit some Q&A. So before we can talk about circles, we really have to do a deep dive of where they come from. And it's based in restorative practices. So circles were kind of born from that theory. So restorative practices in schools is based on, like I said, restorative justice principles. So the aim is to remove ourselves from that punishment mentality and move towards building classroom communities, which is super crucial. So there's tools within circles that help promote that and remove conflict from the scenarios that we're working with. So they provide specific pathways to repair harms, which is the major component for restorative work. There's 3 shifts that have to happen in order for schools and classrooms to be prepared for restorative practices and circles in general. So I want to take a moment to talk about those 3 shifts. These shifts come from the Center for a Restorative Process. You're also going to see a lot of, if you do some Google searches or some academic searches, you're going to find a lot of information about the 3 shifts. And that's so our head can be in the game as a whole, and we can get prepared for doing this work with students. So the first shift acknowledges that troublesome behavior is normal. And so this is a paradigm shift from what discipline and practices authoritarian practices were like in schools prior to. And so we really want to look at just normalizing the whole situation for students. And we want to create opportunities to learn important social and emotional skills. And circles and restorative work can do just that. The second shift is movement from that authority-driven disciplinary action that focuses only on identifying misbehaving students, and then moving that to looking at how the incident affected everyone. So Shift 3 then looks at responsibility for well-being of the community. And so we're shifting it from punishment and exclusion used to control behavior to understanding and repairing and restoring relationships. So those 3 shifts are what we really have to look at before we can start our circle work. So restorative practices, again, build community. So we're wanting to bring everyone together to have a common voice or to have a shared place for voices to be heard. And we want this community to challenge any harmful behaviors that present themselves in schools or present themselves with interactions with each other. So typically, restorative work has always been centered around sitting in a circle. So that's where circles come from, is when we're trying to really get a group of people together, we tend to huddle. We see that in sports, we see that in others, where it's like, hey, we have something important to say, let's get in a circle. So circle dialogue is crucial for the coming together, and so circles were derived from that notion. Classroom circles build community and they respond to harms through dialogue to set things right. So this isn't just a conversation, we're also moving a conversation to learn from it. So schools need to use strategies that are rooted in repairing harm and building and sustaining relationships. So we need to know our students and we need for them to feel like they are one with us, and that's what circles can help us do. We also want to value student empowerment, which leads to the development of intrinsic motivation. And restorative practices are not instead of. They work hand in hand with everything that you have going on within your schools already. So they go hand in hand with your SEL practices, PBIS, and your multi-tiered systems of support that you're already doing. Circles are not about students getting away with things. It's contrary to that. There's tons of accountability and responsibility, and we are just removing that shame and that punitive discipline from the equation. So many positive results from restorative work. So we see reductions in disciplinary referrals to the principal. So our office discipline referrals are going to reduce, as well as suspensions and expulsions. There's a huge reduction in that as well. And also instructional time lost due to managing student behavior reduces. It also improves teacher morale and retention, as well as improving academic outcomes. And this also really addresses the disproportionate referrals of minority students that we see. So now let's define circles. So circles are versatile and can be used proactively in order to develop relationships and build community. They can be used reactively to respond to conflicts and problems. So I really want us today to focus more on the ways that we can proactively use circles. And I'm going to speak a lot to how it's a universal implementation tool. So circles can be used at your tier 1 universal, but they also, for school counselors, which many of you at the table today are, you can use these to address tier 2, tier 3 concerns as well. So that's why the last bullet point talks about circles can be used with any tier of support. So I'm going to give some examples of how we can use them universally as well as to tier 2, tier 3. This quote is from Ristenberg, and he is a big circles component, and it just kind of encapsulates everything that we need to know. In education, circles and groups provide opportunities for students to share their feelings, build relationships, and problem solve. And when there is wrongdoing, to plan an active role in addressing the wrong and making things right. So circles are a combination of conflict resolution, information exchange, decision-making. It also provides healing and support for the individuals within the circle, and all of those things bolster relationship building. So our lovely little flower circles here is a great way for us to just say, this is what circles can do for us. And I know they do this because they've been profound in my career. So I wanted to take a moment, and hopefully the sound works on this, so bear with me if we have any glitches. But these are students from our Project Aware area, which I have the privilege of working alongside as they do the Project Aware grant work. And these students are from Weatherford, Oklahoma, in Western Oklahoma, and they want to share a little bit with you about circles.
Circle time is because I get to feel loved. Circle time because I get to feel heard. Circle time because I feel needed.
I like the circles because we get to talk about a lot of things, and I also like all the different questions.
Because you get to tell people about your life at home, after school, and you get to make friends.
I like to tell stories and tell different stories each day.
Circle time because I feel comfortable and a part of something.
Time because I get to express my feelings in front of the class.
Circle time because it makes me feel alive.
I like circle time because my classmates get to know more about me.
Because it gives you a chance to talk and express yourself.
You've got a friend.
So out of the mouth of babes, that's oftentimes where we get the most joy, right? Is knowing that the work that we do transcends to them and they find value in it. So whose responsibility is circles? Oftentimes we like to put the responsibility on the teachers or the counselors because it falls in the scope of their expertise a lot of times. However, everyone can be involved in circles within your school, depending on the type of circle that you're doing. So if we're doing community morning circles, everyone in the school can be involved to some level. So if there's paraprofessionals or TAs or the cafeteria workers, anybody who has direct relationships with your students who wants to be involved in the circle, it's important that they're at the table if they want to be there. Our administration is important in making sure that there's a universal distribution of this and buy-in. And also them being present also helps share the responsibility, and students get to see them in a different way than just in the office or just as the leader of the school. So there's lots of different individuals that can come to the table to make circles more profound. When we're talking about tier 2-3 circles, you can also have community partners at the table who work with students. So maybe it's an outside licensed mental health provider that works with the student that you're doing the circle with to do some restorative justice work. Having them at the table is helpful as well. Parents in those situations also if you have a parent volunteer and you're doing a circle in your room and they're wanting to participate, it's good to show that our circle is inviting and welcoming to anybody who wants to be involved. So in our culture and across the world, circles have profound meanings. They're strong and they're combined together, and that there's so many symbols that we have that we can relate to that spark connection. But the major goal of a circle is that everyone's voice is added to the center, and it's from the center that the wisdom of the class will begin to emerge. Once someone has spoken into the center, their contribution becomes the property of the circle. And so then it's everyone's shared governance and how we can work together to come up with how to support each other through the process. So now we're going to talk about how to set up a circle. So as you can see here, it's circles or squircles. Squircles sometimes is all we have, right? Because our setup isn't necessarily always conducive to making a perfect circle. So what you're after is just not blocking the flow of eye contact from any of the participants in the circle. So if your circle is cattywampus, it's okay. We just want to make sure there's also some sort of a center to the circle, so everyone feels like their voices are being projected forward. Acoustics matter. This is also very difficult in many of our school buildings. So please note that I know the challenges that come with that. It's also looking at, is there major construction going on in my school right now? Maybe my classroom at this time is not the appropriate place to do it. Where could the safest place to be to do the circle happen and occur? Every voice must be heard in a circle or have the opportunity to pass Students can also say, I prefer to pass, or just take the talking piece and move it over. But everybody has to have the option and or the choice in a circle. So we often use a talking piece where that can be passed around. During the time of COVID, we can also use verbal and nonverbal cues. So we're not necessarily having to pass an object per se. So we can get really creative with what those cues are from one participant to the next. The circle keeper is the facilitator. So when you see this being referenced throughout this presentation, just note facilitator equals the circle keeper. The circle keeper is the one who is going to set up the circle, help with any kind of issue that may occur within the circle, and guide the process of the circle. That person needs a toolkit, or at least to have something you can grab quickly in order to do circles. And so as the school counselor, if you plan to do circles, then you want to make sure you have something you can take from one location to the other. Some things I suggest is a bell or some sort of device that makes noise. This is going to come in handy when we learn a little bit more in the future slides about opening the circle. So it's a ceremonious way in which you can start the process of getting everyone tuned in together. Some people like to use battery-powered LED candles that they put in the center of the circle, and this kind of promotes a feeling of warmth. So the inner therapist in me always wants people to feel comfortable and warm. And so sometimes that draws people's attention in. It also provides a distraction technique for individuals so they can focus on that and not be focused on what other people may be thinking about them. So it's a good way to focus your energy and be mindful. You can also use stones that you can float in a body of water. Maybe you want to do some floating LED candles. Any of those things are okay in the center of the circle. Some people also use some sort of tray or blanket or a piece of fabric that they lay random items in the center of the circle that they'll use, because there's different types of circles I'll talk about that provides participants the ability to go into the center of the circle and out of the circle. So you can have materials displayed in the center of your circle. Talking pieces can be sticks, stones, seashells, toys, fabrics. So there isn't a rhyme or reason. You can get as creative as you want with regards to what your talking piece is if you choose to use one. Age matters. And so if you're using small toys with little kids, please note that they like to get creative with them. So we want to think of our audience and our age range when we're picking our talking pieces as well. So principle of non-interference is crucial to this process. It's important in building a community where people feel safe to express themselves. We're giving a structure to the circle so that each person's voice can be heard. And when all voices are in the center, the circle has a way of surfacing what is true. So the tenets of non-interference are: we're simply welcoming what people say without trying to influence them. And so as the circle keeper, even though you're there to maintain some order and some routine, you're not interjecting anything to sway or counsel or any of that. If someone is in pain, we listen and we allow simple listening to be the comfort. We do not take away their pain. This isn't a time that we interject and want to heal or sway. It's really hard for us as humans to just sit with what people are saying, especially when the things that are coming from them feel painful or angry or sad. But it's super crucial for us just to be there in a very humble space where we're actively listening and receiving. If someone is confused, we simply listen and trust that it's in their own way, the circle will provide clarification. This isn't a time for you to be solution focused. If someone is angry, we honor their anger. So we're not wanting to shame or redirect any of that. We're wanting to hold space for that. We're trying to encourage students that emotions are a normal part of being a human being, and it's containment of those. So how can we teach containment in a way that's productive for everyone? So we're not indulging in psychological maneuvers here. You do not have to be a licensed professional to provide circles or restorative circles. You just have to have a caring heart and a desire to want to build relationships. So when teachers are hesitant about doing circles, it's encouraging them that anyone can do a circle. Is your heart in the right place? And are you willing to take on the journey of circles together? We're not here to heal or fix. We're just listening. So there's circle guidelines that we have to go over with participants. I've put together kind of an umbrella overview. You can get more specific with these, and obviously age matters on how you word these guidelines. But if the guidelines fall within these tenets I'm about to discuss, then you're okay. But these need to be presented and discussed, which I'll go over a little bit when we go over the routine of a circle. So we want to speak from the heart. This means speaking for yourself, talking about what is true for you. So this is where our I statements and teaching students about I statements are super important, to where we're focusing on us. And when we're doing restorative circles, where we might be talking about conflicts, hot button issues, or problems that relate to behavior, a lot of times it's easy to blame others. And so what you'll find is the participants will then be talking about someone else versus themselves. So the circle keeper will just redirect to say, thank you for sharing. Can we talk about how we feel, remember our guidelines to speak from the heart? So we want to make sure that we communicate that to the participants of speaking from the heart. And then the second one is listening from the heart. So sometimes without even knowing, we have assumptions about people in the circle, and we, unfortunately, as humans, judge. And so these assumptions can keep us from really hearing what we have to say and what others have to say. So if we teach students to really listen from the heart and take away any notions or upset that they may have with someone, we can learn from each other. And this one is a big one. We as humans always want to rehearse. So I don't know about you guys, but when you're teachers in elementary school, I can just go back to my elementary school and they would make us read out loud, and we would count ahead to see which paragraph we were going to get. And some of us, if you were like me, furiously read ahead. So that way, when it was your turn, you had everything right when you presented. So we're notorious for wanting to rehearse or pre-plan what we're going to say. That's a normal human behavior. So in this, we're just really trying to teach students that there's no need to rehearse. We need to trust the circle and trust ourselves within the circle to say what we need to say when it's our turn, and that there's not going to be any judgment for that. And when we find ourselves rehearsing, we just need to remind ourselves, no need to rehearse, and bring our attention back to the person who is speaking. This teaches students to be present in the moment, and it really starts to hone those active listening skills, which so many of us need to practice and explore all the time. So the final circle guideline is, without feeling rushed, say just enough. So here we're really focused on containment. So we want to keep in mind that time is limited. You have a group of students, sometimes 30 students in a circle. And when we do that, we really have to be cognizant of everyone's time. So there's a lean in expression which is related to speak from the heart, which you can also use. So instead of using words like containment or without feeling rushed, just say enough, you can say, remember, we lean in and we're really keeping our mind on the time that we have with everyone. So if somebody seems to monopolize, which we're going to always have personalities that will have more to say in a circle than others. And so we want to always remind students, as the circle keeper, does it serve the circle in a good way? Is what we're saying going to move the circle experience for everyone forward? So the student participant voice, these are make remember agreements. So we have our guidelines and those stay pretty standard, and those can be built by the circle keeper. You don't have to have buy-in from the circle for those. But for make and remember agreements, it is all buy-in from participants in the circle. So each individual class should be given multiple opportunities to make additional agreements. So you'll have your guidelines you review, but then we're going to also have a list of these. They may be related to confidentiality, gossip, side talk. It's whatever the group decides the guidelines are going to be, and agreements are going to be around those particular things that could come up within the circle. And we want to let the group define its own wording. So let their language drive those make remember agreements. If there is no consensus on a proposed agreement, then it's not an agreement. So we have to have 100% buy-in from everyone there, or it cannot be a make remember agreement. So let's use confidentiality for an example. So let's say we have a group of 10 students together and everybody agrees that confidentiality should be there except for one person. So unfortunately, the one person, it's not an agreement that we have. So then we say, it's not an agreement for this particular circle. So please note, all participants, confidentiality is not part of the agreement. So let's honor that moving forward. Meaning students get to decide then, confidentiality is not honored here. So I need to make sure that I only share what I'm willing for everyone to know. But this allows students to start to understand how to promote and communicate contracts and have a voice and honor each other. For the agreements to get consensus when you're in a larger group, you can use fist to 5 to generate consensus. You can also do thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs to the side to say like, how are we voting on this particular agreement? And then remember, the authority figure cannot impose any of the agreements. You as the participant in the circle can vote and agree to them, but you can't impose and or mandate something happens with these agreements. They're negotiated by the group. It's also, this is my side note that I was afraid I'd miss, and so I definitely need to hit this. It's important to remind everyone in the circle that we're mandated reporters. And I use a disclaimer every time I do a circle. And this just provides the forum for students to then make a choice of whether or not they want to share certain things with the larger group, or if they would prefer to not do that. It can damage a circle if someone is not aware that that's the case, and then you have to go and then report something that they said within the circle. So it's good to just have the disclaimer before you do it. It's important to share what categories you need to talk about. So for instance, I do the standard if anyone in the circle today discusses that they want to hurt themselves or someone else, or they discuss things of a violent nature that is concerning, then I am required to help you and provide safe haven. So just know that going into the circle. So whatever disclaimer that you come up with, it's also good to check with your district's mandated reporting policy and any professional guidelines and the policies that they have with regards to reporting. So therefore you're well versed in what it is that you would need to report in situations. All right, so our sequence of events. We want to start the circle, and as the circle keeper, you are going to want to make sure your headspace is in the right where it needs to be. So before you start the circle, take a few deep breaths, just really center yourself, knowing that the work is not on you, the work is on the process of the circle. The circle will balance everything through the process, and just trusting the experience of it. You want to make sure that you open the circle. And so earlier when I made that list, a bell was listed. I play music from my phone that's soft, no words. And I just play that softly while everyone's gathering into the circle. And it kind of provides a meditation moment for everyone to be centered and ready to go. I fade the music out, and then I open the circle to start talking about the guidelines. So I review those guidelines that are standard for the circle, and then I will then, if it's the first one, then we're teaching them. But if it's multiple times we've done this, it's just reminding them. And then we review the make remember agreements that we might have had in a future circle. And if this isn't, we always say, is there more we want? Does anybody have any agreements they want to bring to the table today before we start circle? And this gets brief over time. It seems like it's a lot, and this is going to take 5 hours to do a circle, but it doesn't. If you do the prep work and know at the beginning, a lot of circle work is about providing the framework and teaching how to do circles, and then the flow just starts and it becomes a well-oiled machine. I can do a circle within 15 minutes, a brief circle, and then more intense restorative circles can take longer depending on the subject matter. So when we're doing the work, that's the big piece of this process, is we're now making that connection to the talking piece. So this is where this comes into the arena. So we want to do a check-in round, and oftentimes with the check-in round, it is a low risk question. So this is something that is going to be easy for any participant to respond to. I have also in the past used a fishbowl where the students just threw in a bunch of ideas for those questions for the check-in round, and I would just randomly pull. You can have a standard go-to, or maybe your opening question is related to the subject matter. You're going in as a school counselor and you're talking about empathy. So you want your opening question to be something that sparks conversation about empathy. So you can make your opening question whatever is relevant to the subject matter. Some of the questions that I wanted to share with you today, I always like students to compare themselves to what animal they are. So what animal is most like you today? What color most represents you today? What is something you look forward to within your day? So there's so many things. If you were a superhero, what superpower would you have? So we could really hone in what we want that opening question to be, but it's low risk. This isn't where you would come out and say something about feelings out the gate right away, or an intense, let's talk about bullying. Tell me how you feel about bullying. That wouldn't be in the check-in round. Then we move into the core activity, where we're building the community and connection. So that's the meat of the circle. What are we here to talk about? And if we're doing restorative work, this is where we start talking about what the behavior was, or what the miscommunication was around the situation, and we start to really dissect that out. Then we go into a closure and a checkout round. And the closure is a ceremonious end to the circle. And you're wanting to, you do a checkout round before you close, and that checkout round is typically time sensitive. At this point, people are liking to share. And so now we're needing to close this down and wrap it up. So oftentimes I lean on say 2 words about your experience today. So you could say 1 to 2 words about how the circle went for you today. And then for the closure, prior to COVID, I used hand squeeze, which I obviously practiced with little students before doing an actual circle. But with the hand squeeze, you're essentially, everyone grabs hands around the circle, and then the circle, the keeper or facilitator I just squeeze to my right or my left. And then when they felt the squeeze, they squeezed their partner's hand. And when it got back to me, it's like a warm hug. So I always like to close my circles out with, I call it the McGee hand squeeze. You can recoin it, you can make it your own. You don't even have to do that. And during COVID, with there being barriers to proximity, we want to get really creative with how we close a circle. So you could ring the bell. If you were playing music at the beginning, maybe you play music at the end. So there really isn't a right or wrong way to open or close a circle. You just want it to be ceremonious in some way. After you've done restorative circles as a counselor, or if you're a part of a restorative circle that's more intense, where we're talking about some really strong emotions or behaviors, then you really want to use the time to debrief with a colleague. You can also use debriefing for more standard basic circles as well, just to enhance the dialogue between you and a coworker in order to make the experience stronger. So debriefing is always crucial to learning, and I suggest everyone do that as much as they can with someone who's also invested in the process. So I'd like to get into some prompting questions, and we want to make sure that the questions we ask within that core component of the circles, the meat part that I talked about earlier, is we really want to make sure that they're meaningful to the lives of students. We want them to be quality. We want to give voice to existing unspoken questions. So consider, what does it mean to be popular? This is an example of a question that is implicit to many students' mind, but is perhaps rarely discussed openly. So you could have a discussion around popularity and what it means to be popular. We want to use simple and clear language. We want open-ended, yes or no questions, kind of do not promote communication and exploration. So we want to avoid those. And we want to invite deeper inquiry. That's the goal. So prompts related to current events, for which time is it planned in curriculum, or to enhance a guidance lesson that you've done. Any of those are wonderful prompting question topics. Remember, it's about inquiry, not advocacy, discovery, not teaching facts or proving a point. So this is an example that came up whenever I was helping a teacher in my past, and it was the questions framed around, why is it always best to be polite? So that's maybe helpful, but it also assumes its own conclusion. So you may as well say, it's best to be polite, tell me why. It might be more interesting to ask, what makes relationships work out well? Because when you're saying what makes relationships work out well, we're doing that whole inquiry, the deep dive into relationships, what does make them work well? And then we can actually have a conversation and dialogue about that. Prompting questions always support restoring. And that's the process in which we loosen the grip on the stories we have constructed about each other. And it opens up new possibilities for how we see and experience each other. We want them to energize the class and get the attention of students. And we want to invite deeper follow-up questions. So with affect questions, these are illicit expressions of attitude, values, or feelings from students. So this is typically when we're doing restorative circles, to where we're actually addressing a hot button issue or a topic for exploration based off behavior. I guide those tier 2, 3 circles in this way. So I want my affect questions to center around what happened and what role did they play. And this helps the student or participant create ownership. And then I move into what were you thinking at the time, which then helps the participant reflect on more impulsive actions that might have been occurring. And then what have you thought about since? So this helps reflect on choices and consequences that have happened as a result of the situation or the experience. Those affect questions move on to say who or how many people have been affected by what has happened. And this is that empathy component that we're after. We're really wanting the student to connect to this particular incident had the effect on these people in this way. And the last one on this slide is, what do you need to do to make things right? This is where we're taking, okay, we've had this experience, we know who it's affected, and now what is our plan to move forward? So this piece is crucial because we're really focused on not shaming and just being proactive with what we do when a mistake has happened or an incident has caused us to get derailed in some way. So I talked about being able to do a circle in 15 minutes or less. I started my career in inpatient psychiatric treatment, but I worked with adolescents in a substance abuse rehab for 9 of those years, and it's near and dear to my heart. Those students were all tier 3 if we needed to categorize them. And I'm going to tell you that there are times in which we needed to do more intense circles, but every day, just to do a check-in before we started a content, I would do these 3 questions. These 3 questions kind of help balance things out and provide a quick circle experience for everyone. So feel free to use this or something similar, but it's, how are you feeling? You can put, for little kids or even for anyone for that matter, just having filling words present, something that they can reference, whether they be written words or little emojis for young kids in which they can look and see, oh, I feel that way. So small kids can even point to something if you have it laminated and you want to pass it around. If you put each emoji in a different color, they can say the color of the emoji that they are most like today, which if they're not reading yet, then that helps them be able to say I'm red, and then you know that that means they're angry. So there's lots of ways that you can do the feeling check-in with everyone. So you would, in the circle, have the talking piece or the cue, and each person would go around and say how they were feeling, and not why, just how you're feeling. So there's no explanation, which helps the containment piece. And then after everyone is shared, then you go into the next question, which is, what is your goal that you have today, or what is a goal that you have today? And this helps students start to be able to decide how they want to direct their day. Like, what is something that they really want to accomplish for their day? When you first start this one, it's hard for smaller kids. Older kids get this really quickly. So really doing some foundational work on helping young students know what a goal is and how to set a goal and what that looks like. So everybody then would go around and answer that question. And then the third and final question is, who can you ask for help? And this question does that community buy-in. This is that building relationships piece that we're after with circles. And so they're able to name someone who may or may not be present in the circle. And so if it's someone in the circle, one of the barriers that we find with this particular question is they may just always choose Cheryl to be the person that they want to ask for help. And so if you notice in a circle as the circle keeper that everyone keeps choosing Cheryl as the one they want to ask for help, as the circle keeper, you can model here and you can step in and say, not negating, because Cheryl may still say, absolutely, I'll support you. That's the phrase that I encourage students to use when someone asks for help is, I support you, or I would love to support you, however, I'm unable to. So guiding and directing that. However, in the event that Cheryl does say to the participant that she'll support them, then you as the circle keeper can say, in addition to Cheryl, is it okay if I check in with you today to see how you're doing? Because earlier Cheryl talked about being stressed. And so I just want to make sure that I also help support Cheryl. So is it okay if I check on you too? So this also then reminds the student of, oh my gosh, she did say she was stressed. And a lot of people have asked Cheryl for help today. So this helps start to delegate and really re-engage a student to think about what's going on in the circle. So that's just a quick circle example for you guys, so you could start out circles pretty quickly with just 3 common questions. So I want to talk a little bit. There are so many different types of circles. And so I just wanted to highlight a few of them for you guys today. So the basic circle is what I've pretty much talked about, where you can do those 3 questions, like I said, and the guidelines of opening the circle. So it's literally getting together with a theme that you want to talk about, and it rolls in a sequential fashion from one participant sharing to the next with the talking piece going in order. You can also do energy management circles, in which the focus of those circles is to clearly calm down and recenter. So there could be an array of things going on in a classroom, and a teacher might say, man, no one is focused and paying attention. And oftentimes we implement brain breaks here. And this could be a form of a brain break where everyone circles up and we talk about something. And when we are sharing, instead of passing a talking piece, maybe we stand up. So when we get to share our answer to the question, we get to stand and then sit. So there's lots of ways that we can maneuver our energy management circle. A something special circle is clearly show and tell. So it's where, and everyone loves to do this, whether you're an adult or whether you're in kindergarten. So we all like to share something. So whether it's an experience that they want to tell about, or whether it's an item, if it's an item, we definitely want to give people a heads up about that. So we're just literally going around and sharing something special, and gives everyone a forum in the circle. This is a great way to introduce students to circles, is to just do something fun this way, so they get the routine of opening a circle, talking about their show and tell, and then closing down a circle. A responsive circle is more of the sensitive issue or dilemma. So we're looking at, like, maybe there is a 5th grade girl issue, and we're needing to really work through some of those things that are going on with regards to maybe gossip and bullying. And so we want to do a responsive circle about that, and we just include the individuals that that particular circle pertains to. A feedback circle is timed. And so with the feedback circle, the person speaking has a limited amount of time to speak, and the person that is going next is the timer. So maybe you set the timer for 1.5 minutes, or maybe it's 1 minute, and then we go along that way. So Cheryl's speaking, and the person to my right will be timing. And then when the timer goes off, the next person's the speaker, and the timer gets passed to the person after. This is great whenever you have a limited amount of time and you know how much time you can give each speaker. A popcorn circle is to raise your hand, and then the circle keeper will just randomly call on individuals as their hands are raised. This is great if we feel like participants in the circle may not want to be vocal and may just want to be actively there and present. A popcorn circle then doesn't put any pressure on those individuals because the people who want to share will raise their hand, and then we're able to move around the circle in that way. What you'll find then is the people who may not have wanted to be vocal eventually become vocal in the circle. That happens a lot of the time. You can also use the center, like I was saying before, to where those items that you had, the talking piece, when you're done talking with it, goes back to the center of the circle, and then the next person who wants to speak retrieves it from the center. So you can start using the center of your circle in a popcorn fashion. There's also the fishbowl, which is there's an empty chair in the center. Well, there's several ways to do fishbowl, but the way that oftentimes you see it is there's an empty chair in the center of the circle, and then the speaker, instead of having a talking piece, goes to the center of the circle and they talk from the center, and then when they're done talking they come to the back to the ring. So it's a focal point for everyone to look within the circle, and that person also then is surrounded by everyone in the circle, which is a comfort. So in addition to, there's a wheelhouse circle, which every participant moves in a chair. So if we're all sitting, and this is so hard to do virtually, but if we're all sitting in a circle and then every other person pushes their chair back a chair length, and then the inner ring of the circle now flips their chairs around to then match the people in the back. So now we have a person in front and a person in the back. We're all facing each other, but we're still in a circle. Then you time it as the circle keeper and you say, we have 2 minutes, and you give them a prompting question. And then when the 2 minutes is up, then the outer circle stands up and moves 2 chairs to their right or left. And then now they're partnered with a new person, and then you give another prompting question, and then the students can move around in that fashion. This is a great way to do if you have people potting up or not really wanting to talk to certain people. This is a great way to get everyone talking to each other. And then there's a story of the day circle. So if there has been a big event or a field trip or a unique learning experience, then having students come together after that and doing the meaningful circle, talking about what happened, is another way to do a circle. So circles can be adapted to include any SEL topic that's going on, or any of your counseling domains that you want to hit, and anything that the class may be struggling with or working on. So again, this training is very brief, and it's an overview of circles and the impact and the power that circles can have to better enhance implementation. So again, do a deep dive into further circles. If you are interested in them, there's many trainings that are credible with that can enhance your work. So typically, I would love to be able to do a circle with everyone, but time doesn't permit for that per se. So I want to take this opportunity to open it up for any questions that anyone may have, and just open dialogue about circles. And if anyone has anything amazing they want to share about circles that they're doing in their school, other participants probably really would love to hear that. This is where I do my long teacher pause. Is there anything that stood out from what I said that people have feedbacks or questions about?
I have a question real quick.
Yes, Jenna.
Oh, thank you. Would you recommend the timed circle if we kind of have a time crunch, if we're trying to use it in our small groups, like or which one would you recommend with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you could go wrong. I do think starting small is better than introducing something larger. So timing it is great. It helps with that containment piece of the students getting to know how the circle flow goes. So yeah, I think that's a really great way to start. Has anybody done circles and they love them and outside of me and sees
Feel
the
free
benefit?
to just raise your hand in the reactions if you have.
Okay. Awesome. All right, I just know from a counseling perspective how powerful these can be and the community and the growth that can happen from everyone who participates in them. As an adult and as a professional, I have participated in them with colleagues. So you can use these during professional developments. You can do these with each other to bolster support and to just really have a coming together. They are so healing and so profound, and they're fun and they can be really fun, but they're great for tier 2, tier 3. And as school counselors, you guys are going in and doing guidance quite often and you know these students. And so this really will help support those interventions that you need to do that are more targeted with your students.
So Cheryl, you've got a couple of statements and a question in the chat. So a couple of statements, one from Amy Whitewater, was that they've been doing circles with their teachers in their morning or in their weekly, before their weekly PLCs meetings. And that's really helped them to be less intimidated about facilitating the circles. And I had made a comment that that probably also gives them a chance to feel more connected before entering PLC time. And that takes away that need to feel like they're rehearsing, as you mentioned. And then Lauren mentioned that they're doing circles during their morning meeting times through responsive classrooms. That's awesome. And then Susan said that she has had students request that she host a mental health awareness club and that she thinks circles would be a great thing for that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And then Rosie asked, what is the minimum or maximum of students that can participate in a circle?
So this is a tough question because I've done circles that are pretty large. And that's where timing is crucial. So you can do a circle with as many people as you want. You just really need to think about, do we have time to do more than one question? So ideally, the best circles are 15 or less. However, that's not the reality when we're thinking about our schools. So for restorative circles, if we're looking at tier 2, tier 3, then we want them to be smaller. So I would err on the side of them being under 15. If we're doing universal circles in a tier 1 level, then I think that you could have two. If you have a large number and there's 40 people, you can separate them out into 2 to 3 smaller circles and then have a circle keeper in each one and have them broke out in their room. So if one large circle is not conducive to the environment, then you can split them up. You just need to have strong circle keepers in the others. And once students or participants learn how to be in a circle, it's easy for them to play the role of a circle keeper for another circle. So that's some solutions to larger numbers. All right, don't be intimidated to do this with secondary students. I know this is oftentimes used willingly for elementary, but I encourage you to pull this in and really use this for secondary education and find creative ways to implement this within your day as school counselors, but then also encouraging educators to use it as well. Your teachers.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. And earlier, I'm going to pop Cheryl's email into the chat just one more time in case you joined after I did. Cheryl, you did have a question if your slides were going to be available on the Whova app. My PowerPoint was too big to upload, so I'm just giving people my email to shoot me an email and I'll send them the PDF.
That's perfect. Yeah, everyone here who is also wanting the slides, feel free to email me and I will do it that way as well. I will attempt to upload the slides to the Whova app just to see what it'll do. But in the event that that doesn't happen, feel free to reach out and I will share those with you.
And I also, if attendees didn't notice, put a link to our school-based mental health integration newsletter into the chat. Cheryl and I are on a team with our crisis team school psychologist at the State Department, as well as Sarah Kirk, who's over our comprehensive school counseling piece. And so we have a ton and a wealth of resources regarding crisis response, comprehensive school counseling, mental health integration in schools. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, but definitely sign up for that newsletter because we push out all of the good things we find out about on that monthly. So if you're not on that, I would highly recommend signing up for it. And thanks everyone for being here. We know that it's been a really tough year, and we appreciate all that you're doing.
And I want to do a shout out to Ryan. You are absolutely right. School psychs added to all the things I said, and not just school counselors, all educators at the table, and those school psychs are tremendously important. And please do circles. All right. Thank you everyone for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a great day.